Hey, this is Jamie with Stonemaier Games, and for this week's video, I am going to talk about my top 10 favorite games of 2020. However, as I was creating this list, I realized that, or I just decided that I'm going to do this a little differently this year because a lot of the games on my list were sequels. They were games that had existed in some form before, and now there's a new version of that game. And there were some wonderful games in this category for 2020. In fact, there were so many wonderful games in that category that there were 10 of them. 10 of them for a top 10 list. And so I'm going to do a top 10 list of my favorite sequels and reboots of 2020, as well as a top 10 list of the best completely new games of 2020, in my opinion. Just to mention a few other games before I dive deep into those two lists, are some older games that I played for the first time that weren't released or weren't widely available in 2020. That's kind of how I categorize these games that I'm going to talk about today. Games that were widely available for the first time in 2020. But some games that don't fall into that category were Shards of Infinity, really love that game, Air, Land, and Sea, and Slay the Spire, which isn't even a tabletop game, but I did play and enjoy that a lot in 2020. Some honorable mentions for 2020 games that were released in 2020 that I enjoyed but didn't quite make the top 10 list were High Rise, New York Zoo, and Tang Garden. Also, I asked Stonemaier ambassadors what they thought, what some of their favorite games were from 2020. And in alphabetical order, some of the games they mentioned, some of these might show up on my list, some of them may not, were Beyond the Sun, Calico, Dwellings of Eldervale, which I want to mention, I have not played that game. I know it's made a lot of people's top 10 lists. I have not had access to play that game yet, so I don't. You won't see that one on my list. Empyreal, Spells and Steam, Fort, Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, Isle of Cats, Lost Ruins of Arnak, Maracaibo, Marvel United, On Mars, Pan Am, Pandemic Legacy Season 0, Pendulum, yeah, so I wanted to mention Pendulum. Some ambassadors mentioned that as their favorite game. This was the only new game released by Stonemaier Games, my company, in 2020. It won't be eligible for any of my lists because it's a game that I published. I'm proud of it. I hope people have had fun with it and will continue to have fun with it in 2021. That's Pendulum. Continuing the ambassador list, the Smartphone Inc., Tainted Grail, Tekhenu, The Crew, The Search for Planet X, Tidal Blades, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom. I would say Viscounts of the West Kingdom is probably the second game next to Dwellings of Eldervale that I did not play that I really would have liked to play in 2020. So, let's jump into the best sequels or follow-ups or reboots of 2020. And the first on the list, you can probably kind of see it behind me here, is Marvel Villainous. Marvel Villainous is a follow-up to the Disney Villainous brand, and this one you are playing Marvel villains. I love the asymmetry in this game, so you have your own unique deck of cards as your villain, and that deck plays into your own unique win condition. Every villain has their own unique win condition. I love the way the player mats are set up in this game, that you have a top and a bottom action. Opponents can kind of block your top row actions, and various fate cards connected to you can block your top row actions, but you still have access to the bottom row actions. And it's a game that has so much asymmetry, and yet it is very easy to pick up and learn and play. And so I really, really enjoy Marvel Villainous. It's my top 10 sequel of 2020. My number 10 sequel of 2020. My number 9 sequel of 2020 is one that I've only played digitally, and that is Marco Polo 2. I believe it's not the Wrath of the Khan, but something about the Khan. Marco Polo 2. It takes all the things that I loved about Marco Polo, the first Marco Polo, and still love about the first Marco Polo game, and kind of just tweaks them a little bit, changes the formula a little bit. The way the contracts come out are a little bit different. There's some set collection. There's a lot more focus on the map, really, and there's some set collection based on where you travel on the map. It's just like little things. It's amazing that they made completely different actions in this game, but it still feels so similar and familiar to Marco Polo and all the things that I loved about Marco Polo. So that's my number 9. My number 8 is one of the Magic sets that came out this year that I wanted to highlight that I had a lot of fun with, and that is Magic Jumpstart. So what Magic the Gathering did is they took, here's some examples of the decks. They kind of combined some of the things they've learned over the years into a really neat format in which they created these thematic 20 card decks. So here's like a spooky themed deck, here's a doctor themed deck. And I opened these in shrink wrapped packs. So I didn't know what was going to be inside the shrink wrapped pack. I opened it up and revealed these. And basically all you do is you combine two of these themes together. I just shuffle these two decks of cards together and play a game or a match with the combined Spooky Doctor deck. This would be a Spooky Doctor deck. It was just a really neat way of kind of jumping into a game of Magic. As much as I love drafting, I think this was a really neat way of jumping into a game. And Megan and I had a lot of fun with it because we basically opened all the packs that we had. This was during the pandemic. We couldn't get together with friends. We opened all the packs and we kind of picked different themes that we wanted to play together. I eventually put together a cats and dogs deck that I had a lot of fun with. And there are some new cards in here, but it's a lot of reprinted cards. But just the themes and the way they come together and the way they co-join, I thought was a lot of fun. So Magic Jumpstart is my number 8 on my list of kind of sequels and follow-ups and reboots. Number 7 is The King is Dead 2nd Edition. This was a really pleasant surprise to me. I knew very little about this game, but I got to play it a few months ago. And the core construct of the game is that each player starts out with the same 10 cards. And on your turn, you're either playing one of those cards or passing. And those are the only cards you can play for the entire game. So once I've played one of my 10 cards, I only have 9 cards left to play for the entire game. So passing, the timing of passing becomes a crucial decision. So you can hang on to the cards you need until later in the game, or you can play them early and get what you need early in the game. I love the simplicity of that these are all the actions you have for the game. There's a lot of, the stakes could not be higher for every action you take in this game. I just really enjoyed it. That's The King is Dead at my number 7 slot on this list. And number 6 on this list is one of the most ambitious and really brilliant games of 2020, in my opinion. And that is Pandemic Legacy Season 0. I talked about this on the channel after I had played, I think, maybe 3 or 4 months of the game. You play through 12 months. We have now played through the entire campaign, and we had a lot of fun with it. We played it 2-player. We did pretty well, I think, and we had a lot of fun. Really, the only reason this isn't higher up on this list is because Pandemic is not like the type of cooperative game that I gravitate to. It's a very punishing game. There are bad things happening all the time, and especially in the Legacy version, there are even more bad things happening all the time, trying to slow you down from what you need to accomplish. However, it is such a brilliant design. The storytelling is amazing. The choices you can make that impact the current game and future games are incredible. And just all the work and time and love that went into this game, it really moved me as we were playing it. I've designed a Legacy game. I designed Charterstone, and I know how much goes into making a game like this, and it's really just an incredible feat that they pulled this off. I highly recommend it if you like cooperative games where there is a punishing element where you are struggling against the game. This is a fantastic experience. And I want to say the one thing that really elevates this above the other Pandemic Legacies for me, and I did enjoy the other Pandemic Legacies, is the progression system from month to month. You can, for any given month, you can succeed, which means you accomplish all the goals of that month. You can be adequate, which means that you could fail essentially one of the goals for that month, or you can completely fail. And if you completely fail, you have to replay the month once. And that's when you accomplish none of the goals, or only one of the goals once you get to a certain point in the game where you need to accomplish 3 goals instead of just 2. But I love that, for the most part, we rarely had to ever replay a month because we either succeeded or we were adequate. It would take a lot for a game, especially a punishing game like this, to keep my attention through potentially 24 entire sessions, 23 in this case. But so I'm so glad that we could play this essentially in 14 sessions, 14 games, instead of what could have been a lot more. So I love that they added that. So that's a fantastic choice. I love failing forward in campaign games rather than having to replay a scenario after you fail. So that's a fantastic addition to Pandemic Legacy. That's my number 6. My number 5 game on this list is another one that I've only played digitally on yukata.de, and that is Rajas of the Ganges, the Dice Charmers. I love the original Rajas of the Ganges. It's basically a game where you're using dice as resources to do a variety of Eurogame style things. And Rogers of the Ganges, the dice charmers, as a dice drafting element, as well as a lot of combo building. There are a lot of turns in this game where you do one thing and it triggers another thing that triggers another thing, and that feels really, really good. It also has a one-way action selection track or one-way time track. I really, really like that mechanism. And this one, you can actually go back and forth on the track a little bit, so it isn't only one way. And there's actually more engine building in this game than in the original Rogers of the Ganges, which I really like. This is a fantastic game. I had a lot of fun playing this. In fact, I think, this is the top game that the top sequel that I played digitally, only digitally this year. That's Rogers of the Ganges, the Dice Charmers at number 5. At number 4, another sequel here, big sequel, Glenmore Chronicles 2. Seems like this came out forever ago, right? But no, this was a 2020 release because this has been a super long year. Glenmore 2 came out this year, and this is obviously a reboot of the original Glenmore. It has that one-way time track that I mentioned where you're moving as far forward as you want along the track to pick up a tile and add it to your little your little empire that you're building. There's a tile placement mechanism there. So I love the one-way time track. There's a mechanism involved in how you're kind of comparing yourself to the player who scored the lowest each round. And I found that scales really well at all player counts. I was surprised how well it scaled to like 2 players. Also scales really well up to 4 players. And it's a really rewarding game because whenever you're placing the tiles in your tableau, they trigger not just the benefit on that tile, but also all the benefits of all the tiles surrounding it, which feels really good. This is a game that just feels good. It's a very rewarding game. It's constantly giving you more and more stuff. In fact, I need to make a note because I'm going to do a list soon about rewarding games, and I need to make sure that is included on that list. Fantastic game, Glenmore 2 Chronicles, my number 4 game for this year. My number 3, number 4 sequel for this year. My number 3 sequel for this year is Azul Summer Pavilion. I absolutely love this game. It is my favorite Azul. I highly recommend it if you've played the other Azuls and want to try another Azul, or if you're starting into the Azul series for the first time. This is really a beautiful abstract game that does something different than the other Azuls in that it's very forgiving. You have lots of time so basically you draft tiles during the round. You draft all these tiles. There's a core Azul mechanism where you're drafting these tiles, but rather than needing to place those tiles right away, you just gather all those tiles together, and then in a second half of each round, you are placing those tiles. So you have a lot of information at the point of time when you finally need to actually place the tiles on the board. And you can even save tiles from round to round without penalties. So you can save tiles, a certain number of 4 tiles, to use the next round if you couldn't use them this round. And there's also a really nice, I wouldn't quite say it's engine building, but you are getting more bonuses than just points in this game. In that when you complete certain spaces of your player map, you gain extra tiles. And so that feels really good. That's the big thing that really differentiates this, other than the flexibility that I just mentioned from the other Azuls, in that you are actually getting these one-time special bonuses throughout the game that compared to the other Azuls, you were just getting more points throughout the game. So I thought that was really wonderful. I love this game, Azul Summer Pavilion. Well, up to number 2. Number 2 on this list is one of the games that I've actually played the most this year, because even though it's fairly new, it's so easy to get to the table, so easy to share, and that is Mysterium Park. Mysterium Park is a follow-up to Mysterium, but you can tell it's a much smaller box. It's much easier to set up because they use a new system for setup in this game that makes it so much more streamlined than the previous version, and they cut out one of the rounds, so it actually plays faster too. If you're not familiar with Mysterium, basically it's a cooperative game where one player is a ghost. They've been murdered, and you're trying to solve their murder, but they can only communicate with you via visions, these beautifully illustrated cards. And you're trying to use that information to deduct what card they're trying to get you to eliminate as an innocent person or as a place where the murder did not happen. It sounds kind of grim, but it's not really a grim game at all. It's a beautiful, colorful game with limited information. This is actually my favorite style of cooperative game, a limited information cooperative game. And it's just a wonderful game. I've had a lot of fun playing this with people at all player counts. Even at 2 players, I've had fun playing this. That's Mysterium Park, my number 2 sequel of 2020. I believe I have a hungry cat behind me, so let me leave you in suspense for 1 second while I feed this little cat. Here we go. There we go. That's Walter. He's hungry. All right, my number one sequel of 2020 is Time Stories Revolution. So this is a reboot to the original cooperative series, Time Stories, where each box in the series is standalone. So this is a standalone, self-enclosed game here. Everything you need to play Time Stories is in this box. Time Stories is an adventure cooperative game where you are jumping back or forward in time to typically an alternate version of our universe, of our world, and you are trying to do something. You're trying to accomplish a mission, and you are doing so in a first-person way. So you kind of walk into a room with the other players, or walk into a place, a location, and you see some things in front of you. You see a beautifully illustrated panorama of art composed of several cards, and you decide which of those cards each of you wants to go investigate and learn about. And you flip over the card, you read that card to yourself, and you see what's on the back of that card, and then you put it back down and you talk to the other players about it. This particular version of Time Stories does some things that are different, that I think elevated over the original Time Stories. One, you don't have to go in time loops in this game. You kind of there's time as a resource. Time is still important, but you're never rebooting and kind of just retracing your steps. Two, the skill test mechanism has changed in this game, and I think even much for the better. I didn't mind the original skill test, but the new skill test mechanism in here, you're basically, I won't go into full details here, but you're trying to get a certain number, and if you get less than that number, there is still a consequence. There is still something that happens. If you get more than that number, there's still something that happens. Ideally, you'll get exactly that number, and you'll get exactly what you want. But I like that there's kind of the fail forward system that I mentioned in Pandemic Season 0, but within each individual skill test. You're never like using your turn to do a skill test and just nothing happens. Something will always happen when you do a skill test in this game. I really, really love this series, and I love how they're self-enclosed here. This is my favorite of the new ones so far, the Tidal project. It's kind of I don't want to spoil anything, but it's a really, really cool mission, and yeah, this is my number one sequel of 2020, Time Stories Revolution. Can you believe we're only halfway through this video right now? I will timestamp it so you can perhaps be just joining us right now if you're interested in the best new games of 2020. Let's jump into that list right now. So at number 10, I cheated maybe a little bit, but I don't think these games were widely available in 2020 or in 2019. I think they became widely available in 2020, but I'm going to use them. I'm going to consolidate them and kind of give them a tie because I think they were pretty close. Those two games are Watergate and Hierarchy. These are completely different games, but they both happen to be two-player competitive games with some amount of asymmetry, more asymmetry in Watergate. And Watergate is a tug-of-war game where you're tugging these tokens back and forth as you try to do different things. It's hard to describe in a nutshell, but it's a tug-of-war game. It's really wonderful. It's an excellent two-player game. Hierarchy is a very simple game of kind of you're playing these numerical cards, and you're trying on a common row, and you're trying to play them in such a way, or play your card in such a way that the opponent cannot then follow it up with another card. It's super simple to learn and teach and play. It's super fast. And I just love it. It kind of feels like a tug-of-war game, even though you're actually not tugging anything back and forth. But it's a really, really clever game from Button Shy Games. These games, again, may not exactly count for 2020, but they were very close. I didn't play them until 2020, and I love them this year. So Watergate and Hierarchy tied for my number 10 new games of 2020. And number 9 is a game that I played early on in the year, and that is Flotilla. Flotilla uses the Concordia card mechanism in that each player has the exact same starting hand of cards, and those cards are your actions. So on your turn, you're choosing one of those cards, their characters, you're playing it and using the action on that card. And at a certain point, you're going to play a card from your hand that gathers all played cards back into your hand, and you can start that process again. Along the way, you're gaining new cards, you're gaining better cards into your hand, and that's just like the core mechanism. But I love how that core mechanism is used in Flotilla, in addition to a lot of other new and innovative mechanisms, including these kind of dial style tracks where you're moving around these tracks and gathering stuff, and gathering cards from those different categories. It's tough to describe without visuals, but I would highly recommend, if you like that Concordia card mechanism, check out Flotilla. It is an excellent game, and it is the number 9 game on this list. At number 8 is another game that I played very early on before the pandemic, and that was In the Hall of the Mountain King. This is a game, there's a lot of stuff happening in this game. It uses polyomino tiles, which I love, but the most memorable thing about this game to me is the card stacking system. So you are playing cards into a pyramid of cards, and as you do so, that's kind of the core action system in this game. As you do that, over the course of the game, you get to trigger the benefits of the card you place and all cards below it. So kind of picture you're picturing a card pyramid where that doesn't reset over the course of the game. So early on in the game, when I place a card, I'm only getting one benefit from it. But if I put 2 cards next to each other, and then a card on, the new action is a card on top of those 2 cards, I'm getting the benefit of that card and the 2 cards below it. This cascading effect feels really, really good. I can't stress that enough. I think it's a brilliant action selection mechanism. And even aside from all the polyomino fun in this game, that mechanism is the one that sticks in my head as an absolutely brilliant mechanism. So that's what stands out to me about In the Hall of the Mountain King, my number 8 game of 2020. My number 7 game of 2020 is one that I played very recently, and one that I really recommend in terms of, it was actually the number 1 game on my list for games that if you like Wingspan, you'll probably also like this game, and that is Honey Buzz. Honey Buzz is a beautiful production. You can see it here, actually. Yeah, beautiful production. It's a worker placement game and engine building game where you're building a hive using these hex-shaped tokens, but they're kind of little clusters of hex-shaped tokens, and you're using them to build even better clusters of hex-shaped tokens. And when you complete a cluster of 6 hexes, you trigger all of the benefits on those 6 hexes. So it's kind of similar to the cascading effect I just mentioned in the Hall of the Mountain King, in that you are really putting together these big turns where you're getting all these benefits all at once, and it feels really, really good to do that. There's some other mechanism. There's a cool stock market mechanism in the game. There's a little spatial game. There's a neat actually, the worker placement system is really cool in that there's no blocking, but if there's already, say, a worker bee at one of the worker placement action spots, the next player who needs to go there needs to place 2 worker bees, and then the next player needs to place 3 worker bees, even if that player is already placed there. So if I go first and I put a worker bee there, someone else places 2 workers there, and I really want to go there again, I need to place 3 worker bees there. But it doesn't feel punishing anyway, because you have a lot of worker bees to use, but it still makes a really kind of tight, juicy decision as to whether or not you want to use 2 or 3 worker bees on an action space. But yeah, I love that worker placement system. Also, the components of this game are just beautiful. Honey Buzz, this is my number 7 game, 7 brand new game of 2020. And number 6 on the list is probably the most played game for me in 2020, and that is The Crew. The Crew is another cooperative game, a number of cooperative games on this list. This is a cooperative trick-taking game where you are deciding at the beginning of each game who is going to try to take certain cards. So you have these task cards that come out, and if I take the yellow 2 card, it means during the round I need to win a hand that has the yellow 2. That system is fine. The game itself is good. I think it's a good system. The thing that I really like is the mission system in this game, because each game is essentially a single mission where you are trying to accomplish the tasks of that mission, and they escalate. It starts off super easy. The first mission is super easy. You have 1 card, you're trying to accomplish that card. But over the course of 50 missions, I haven't even played them all. I think I've only played through 25. Over the course of 50 missions, you are trying to, you are given an escalating set of difficulty in terms of all these missions. And I love how they're just like, a lot of them are just little micro missions. You're just playing one mission, and within a few minutes you're done. And then you reset and you play again, and you play the next mission, and so on. But this sense of progression was probably the best onboarding process for me for any new game in 2020, because by mission 25, we were doing all these complex things with trick taking that would have been fairly difficult to jump right into. But because we had played missions 1 through 24 right before that, we were prepared for that mission 25. I love that about this game, and I love that mission system. I'd love to see that in other games where you start off with like the simplest, like the super simplest version of the game, and then you bring more and more rules in for more missions as players continue on down the mission path. Fantastic game, The Crew. That's my number 6 of 2020. My number 5 game of 2020 I don't own, but I had a wonderful experience with it, and that is Beyond the Sun. Beyond the Sun is a tech tree game. You're basically building a giant tech tree on the board that is essentially shared by all players, but you do need to take an action to get access to a new technology. And so a lot of your choices during the course of the game are choosing which technological path along this giant tech tree you are taking. And it unfolds really well in that you start off with very few of these actions on this tech tree, and you unlock more and more of them as you play. I love that. I talked about onboarding a second ago with The Crew, but I think Beyond the Sun does a great job with that too, because you start off with only a few core actions, and as you open up new actions, whether I open them up or another player opens them up, I can see, okay, these are my options. I now have more options. I am ready to kind of grok these increasing number of choices that are unfolding in front of me. I love that. Beyond the Sun also does some cool things with income that I haven't seen in other games. You can watch my video about that to learn more. But I had a wonderful time playing this, and I really am excited to play it again the next time I get it to the table. So that is Beyond the Sun, my number 5. And I actually need to make a note about that, because I need to mention it on another list that I'm making. My number 4 game of 2020 is the last game I played in 2020, and that is Lost Ruins of Arnak. This is a worker placement deck building game that I had a lot of fun with. This is a really good medium weight Euro game. There's a ton of progression in this game. You're building a deck. You are adding explorers to help your crew. You are unlocking new action spaces. Again, that idea that you start off with very few action spaces and you're unlocking new action spaces as you play. There's a really cool mechanism with how certain artifact cards that cost a certain resource and are really good typically near the end of the game, you start off only seeing one of them, but you see more and more of them over the course of the game. And the cards that you start off seeing a lot of that help your engine, your deck engine, you see fewer of them at the end of the game in the card row. So there's a really nice balance there. Just a lot of just well-constructed mechanisms put together in this game. And it's also, again, a beautiful production. It looks beautiful on the table here. That is Lost Ruins of Arnak, my number 4 game of 2020. These are all great games on this list. It was very hard to rank them. But I think, so I've just done my best to rank them here. My number 3 game of 2020, new game of 2020, is Tidal Blades, Heroes of the Reef. I'll just call it Tidal Blades. This is, again, another worker placement game that uses some of my favorite elements of worker placement, some of which are taken from Yedo, in which Yedo does have blocking. In this game, there isn't blocking. Rather, it's more like viticulture in that the actions, any player can choose the actions, but if you are the first player to go there, you will typically choose one of the bonus action spots. So in addition to getting the core benefit of an action area, of an island, you also get a bonus, which feels really good. Also, there are challenges that you can only accomplish if you are at certain locations. So this is the thing from Yedo, where you go to a certain place, and to accomplish that thing, to attempt that challenge, you need to be in a certain location that corresponds with that challenge card. There's a ton of progression in this game. You're getting better and better custom dice over the course of the game. You're leveling up 4 different aspects of your character over the course of the game in a different order. That feels really good. You're getting access to more cards from your deck, your unique asymmetric character deck. I love asymmetry in games. And there's a huge push your luck element in this game related to the skill test. I absolutely love the skill test mechanism in this game. I go into a lot of detail about it in my video about Tidal Blades, so you can watch that if you're curious. But I love the skill test mechanism. And again, it is also yet another beautiful game, a really, really beautiful game. And this is just my normal standard edition. I don't have any of the upgraded stuff. This is my Kickstarter copy, but I backed it at the core level, and it's still just a beautiful game with a ton of replayability. Yeah, and even I think when I originally talked about it, one of the mechanisms, the monster mechanism, I wasn't super high on it because whenever you go to fight the monster, you lose all your dice. But I learned that I played wrong the first time, and you actually, whenever you go to fight the monsters, you get a free die just for going to fight the monsters, and you use that die to fight the monster. So it really changed the way that I thought about fighting the monsters, because you get that free die, you know you're going to lose it, but so what? You just got a free die to go fight the monsters. Yeah, this is a wonderful game. I really, really love Tidal Blades. It is my number 3 game. Really, the only reason it's my number 3 game and not higher is that I am going to be really hesitant to play the 2-player version. I've only played it at 4 players so far. 2-player requires a bot, and I'm not super excited about controlling a bot in a 2-player game. But otherwise, super, super fantastic game. Tidal Blades, Heroes of the Reef, my number 3. My number 2 favorite new game of 2020 is one that came out at the beginning of the year, and that is The Isle of Cats. The Isle of Cats is another polyomino game where you're filling your ship with cats. There's a lot of fun puzzly elements that go into what you're doing there. You're trying to fill rooms with cats, you're trying to cover mice with cats, you're trying to cover treasure maps with cats. That's combined with a drafting mechanism. You're drafting cards in this game every round to get different goals, to get more cats, to get resources that you need to get cats. The game also gives you a ton of resources. It gives you fish every round. You get a ton of fish every round, and the fish are what you're using to take actions. So that's the style of game similar to like Clans of Caledonia, where every round you get a big burst of income, and then your round lasts as long as you spend that income, as long as you have these fish to spend. I really love that style of game where you just get a ton of resources and your round lasts as long as possible based on how many of those resources you want to spend that round. The Isle of Cats is it's just a wonderful game. It's a colorful game. It's easy to teach. I love the drafting. I love the polyomino tile placement. I've had a ton of fun with this game. Even though it came out really early this year, I definitely did not want to forget it because I've had a lot of fun with it, and I will continue playing it well into 2021 and beyond. That's The Isle of Cats. This is one that actually really does play really well at any player count. I have the 1 to 4 player version. Yeah, I've played it at 2, 3, and 4 players and enjoyed all those player counts. Finally, my top game of 2020 is one that I've only played once, but I've thought about it more than any other game after that. I can't wait to play again, and I am playing again this weekend. It's an incredible game, in my opinion, and that is Dune Imperium. It's by the makers of one of my favorite games, Clank, actually. Dune Imperium, like Clank, is also a deck-building game, but deck-building in a very different way. In Dune Imperium, you're given a hand of cards, and you pretty much only play 2 of those cards, because you play a card, and then based on the location of that card, or the locations on that card, you are placing your worker on that location and taking that action. And so you will have a bunch of cards in your hand that are left over at the end of the round, but that's okay, because at the end of the round, there's a battle, there's a skirmish, and the cards that you have left over can play into that skirmish. Or you can choose to have cards remaining in your hand that help you buy cards. So during the course of each round, you are not acquiring cards. Like in deck building games, usually most of your turn is acquiring a new card. In Dune Imperium, the cards you acquire, that happens at the end of the round based on the resources you have left over on the unplayed cards you have at the end of the round. So if I have a few cards that have, say, I don't remember actually the resource that they call it, but there's a resource that you're using to attain new cards, and it's shown on the cards that you don't play. You use that resource to buy new cards. I love that. I love how simple this game is. There aren't a lot of resources. There aren't a lot of icons in the game. It's a fairly simple interface. The complexity comes from the cards that you add to your deck over the course of the game. I also love the how tight the game is. Like you're only trying to get 10 points basically. You can try to get a few more points than that to be the winner, but there aren't a lot of points to gain. So every time you get a point, it feels really, really good because it's only one of like 10 points. I also love, I don't know much about the world of Dune, But I love how I'm pointing to a part of the board that has the influence tracks for 12 different, or for 4 different kind of factions in the game. And each faction really feels unique in terms of the benefits that you get when you gain an influence, when you place a worker in that faction's area. So I really like how there's this kind of factional asymmetry, even though no player themselves is a faction. Each player is a character with a little bit of asymmetry to their character. It's almost hard to describe what makes this game so special. Hopefully I've described some of those things here, but I played this game and I just could not stop thinking about it. I haven't stopped thinking about it, and I'm incredibly excited to play it again. Dune Imperium is my #1 new game of 2020. This has been a long video. Thank you for joining me for this. And I hope you're okay with me dividing these lists into 2 different segments of sequels and best new games. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your favorite sequel or follow-up game of 2020, and I'd also love to hear your favorite new game of 2020. You can break it down into longer lists if you want. If you want to do your top 3, your top 10, however you want to do it. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me for this year of videos, and I look forward to having more conversations with you about games in 2021. Take care.